Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Community members in Soweto are saying that they want the evicted foreign-owned spaza shop owners back. Now, this story stems all the way to August. In August, a 21-year-old man was shot and he was injured and he remains in intensive care in a hospital. This happened in Soweto, in White City. In response to the shooting, Operation Dudula, which is an anti-migrant group, intervened and they shut down several businesses owned by foreign nationals in the area. The shooting occurred at one of the spaza shops and the closures happened throughout a few weeks. According to reports, about 20 shops were closed down, could have been more. Operation Dudula was called to close this, right? To close down the tuck shop after they had been looting allegedly by the community during the chaos that followed the shooting. And several other tuck shops, as I said, were also affected by this particular series of events. Just 1 month after this eviction, we're in September now, apparently members of the community are saying that they're having different feelings, right? They don't actually have the same view about the closures of the tuck shops that they had at the beginning. So this is what City Press went to investigate, and this is what community members said.
Babuza lo ukuthi ngitradinga na.
Kuzona masiya kuyama-cafe lana wethu lana awutholi lutho. Emakuleni futhi uthola yonke into. Emakuleni sithola everything. La kulama shop manje at least besithi sifuna ukubonanyana noma amakula loka njengoba amakula loka angekho kanje, but still kuyafana. Hardly into encane lo ifuna into encane kwa Colgate ayikho. You understand? Ayikho yamuza umama manje uthi Rox, mina ngithi Colgate ayikho. Ilo ntuzana into egcobisa inwele, i-moisturizer egcobisa inwele ayikho. At least kuzoba ngconywana 14 because nabantwana mabaya esikoleni babafuna into zokukhera kumele ukuthi bathathe kumanje abantwana bebangasakhera bebahamba nalezo imali babuye nazo, so at least manje bazokwazi ukuthola.
So City Press is reporting that elderly residents in particular have been very vocal about the difficulties that they've faced since the closure of these tuck shops. And they've changed the names in their reporting around the community members. But apparently this is what community members are saying. Nokuthula Zungu, a longtime resident of White City in Soweto, explained that a meeting was held between the victim's family, the store owner, and the local councillor. She mentioned that the family was compensated for the injury caused by an alleged employee of the store. Zungu expressed the community's need for closure and called for a public address by all the involved parties. She said, now that everything is sorted, let the family, Operation Dudula, and the store owner address the community because what has happened affected us and still affect us. We need small items like big beef stock. We have to go all the way to the mall. And she said that this was an inconvenience to her. City Press asked her why she doesn't shop at the local tuck shop owned by residents. And she replied, we are always told ayiko, it's not available. So what is the point? Apparently, according to City Press, the sentiment is shared by many in the community who feel that the local tuck shops do not stock the items that they need. City Press spoke to another elderly resident, Gladys Mutawung, who echoed the sentiments stated by Zungu and called for a community meeting to address the situation. Mutawung explained, obviously that's not her real name, that during the social relief distress grant payout days at the beginning of each month, it has become increasingly difficult for elderly residents to access essential goods. They are forced to travel to the mall, which requires them to use public transport, which is a challenge for elderly residents, both physically and financially, because they don't always have money for the taxi fare. She said, as a community, we're not used to this change. The local tuck shops don't always meet our needs. Without this foreign-owned store, we are forced to go to the mall, which is too expensive for us as elderly people. So in a way, they're echoing the remarks that were articulated in the video that we just watched. Eric Koza, not his real name, highlighted the impact of the closure on the community's children. This is what he said. The other day, the children were excited to see the store owner because they thought he was reopening the store. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. It's hard now because we used to get cash back from the store. Now we have to ask our neighbors to lend us transport money and we repay them when we return. So apparently the store was also working as a small, microfinancing type of facility. So this revisit by City Press, they spoke to a business owner as well, Sfiso Makubo, who is a local businessman whose shop is located outside a foreign-owned tuck shop. So Sfiso, who spoke to City Press previously, actually acknowledged that the return of the foreign-owned tuck shops, spaza shops, would bring back competition. And he said, as a businessman, there's nothing I can do about the return of the shops. But he remains grateful for the current customers he's getting. He said, when it comes to my business, I have regular customers who come and buy from me, and I appreciate that. But with the spaza shop back, my profit making has become a challenge. He said that also, this owner of shops, Fiso, he said that customers frequently gave him suggestions on how he can improve his business and better cater to their needs. He says he's open to their ideas and that he's constantly striving to meet the community's expectations. So clearly there's an issue of competition between local-owned shops and these migrant-owned shops. Mandla Bengu, not his real name, who delivers bread to local businesses, provided another perspective on the community's preferences. He believes that many residents prefer the migrant-owned tuck shops to those owned by locals. Bengu shared that residents have made disparaging remarks about the products sold by local businesses, calling their bread dusty and refusing to buy from them. He said, how can one be motivated to run a business when your own people have no faith in it? Bengu added that there seems to be a bias in the community, with some residents being more supportive of the immigrant-owned businesses than those run by their locals. In a further twist, this is according to City Press, a community member who wished to remain anonymous alleged that the victim's family was compensated and that members of Operation Dudula were allegedly bribed to allow some of the foreign-owned or immigrant-owned spaza shops to return. These allegations have added another layer of complexity to the situation and have left residents feeling uncertain about the true state of affairs in their community. Operation Dudula did not respond to the questions that they were given by City Press in respect to the story. So that's the framing, that's the context, that's where everything is. What is the data? What is the information around the township economy, the local economy? Let me give you some information. Pick n Pay had a report, their integrated annual report in 2021. And in this 2021 integrated annual report, they said that the country's total grocery retail market has an estimated value of 900 billion rands. And this is in 2021, with about 60% of the market considered formal and 40% considered informal. According to Pick n Pay's 2021 integrated annual report, there are 4 large retailers: Pick n Pay, ShopRite, Spar, and Woolworths. And those 4 large retailers account for 50% of the sales in the grocery retail market. Pick n Pay estimated that it has almost 10% share of the total market and about 16% of the formal market. They didn't give a definitive number on how much they have in the informal market, but you can basically calculate that part of their share is within that informal market, so to speak. And I'll explain how that works. So the 2021 South African Township Marketing Report found that spaza shops contribute 5.2% to South Africa's GDP and they employ 2.6 million people. So it's a large share of the economy, and it's not insignificant to the retail economy in and of itself, as you can see from the data. So, some thoughts, some reflections. Number one, the township economy should be owned by South Africans living in the township. Local economy should be locally owned. That's how you grow wealth in those communities. That's how you create opportunities in those communities. That's number one. Number two, there's a lot of potential in the township economy, the local economy, but many people are not able to access it because they do not have access to capital. And there's lots of competition from the big retailers, the big four that we spoke about earlier, and they are also trying to go into those spaces. Some more data. A 2016 report by the Consumer Behavior Monitor, Nielsen South Africa, found that the informal or independent retail sector boasted 46 billion rands in annual sales, with more than 9 million households shopping in these traditional trade stores. According to the report, what they're calling traditional trade stores, these are brick and mortar outlets with a fixed location. So they exclude hawkers and tabletops, and these stores are informal and independently owned. So they cover stores such as the spaza shops, okay? So we can now get a clearer picture of the size and scale of this market. 46 billion in annual sales in 2016. That number has obviously gone up, but this was the data that I could find. Right. Number three, one of the spaces which could provide an income to the local economy is the spaza shop business. It is the spaza shop business. However, this is my fourth point. Right now, running a spaza shop is a difficult business with low margins. That's particularly why you see these shops being dominated and owned or operated by immigrants. Number five, immigrant shop owners often make a lot of sacrifices to be able to keep those kinds of shops running. They often have family members working there for free, working for long hours, for no pay, and they also try as much as possible to find ways to get value off the 20 cents, the 50 cents, the 1 rand differential. Sometimes they live in those stores as well to avoid having to pay rent on accommodation so that they can, maximize their profits. The business in and of itself is a low margin business. You have to get high volumes of sales at low margins to be able to make it work. And it's a very difficult business to operate. And the only way that they are able to sometimes do this is by having these very harsh working conditions for themselves, for their families, right? Number six, my point that I want to make, sixth point. In general, migrant communities are willing to do this kind of hard labor, low wage type of labor because they don't have many options and they cannot access many other types of jobs which require documentation. This is not necessarily unique to South Africa. It's happening in America. It's happening in Europe. It's happening in other parts of the world with large immigration numbers. There's that funny moment where Donald Trump makes comments about Haitians that they're coming to eat the dogs, the cats, etc., etc. There are a lot of sentiments around the world around migrant communities, and there's a lot of tension around issues pertaining to them. They are coming into countries to do certain types of jobs. We recently saw with the Babel and Ocean Basket and Menlyn Mall in Pretoria, other issues around this as well, around harsh working conditions for immigrants, which sometimes exclude the local economy because they're not willing to work under those types of harsh conditions with low pay, under abusive conditions, right? So the sixth point I'm making is that migrant communities are often willing to do this because they don't have other alternatives, right? Seventh point I want to make is that in order to make these small businesses viable, having identified what I just said above, In order to make these small businesses viable in the townships, there has to be funding that is made available to township entrepreneurs who want to get into the space. The challenge to growing small businesses in the township is access to funding. Without funding, it will be difficult to see a shift in the patterns of ownership and practice as they stand right now. South Africa has a very highly rated banking system, number 19th in the world by the 2019 World Economic Forum Global Competitiveness Index, 19th in the world. However, when it comes to the funding of small businesses, the South African banking system ranked 96th in the world. It's a big gap. World class, top 20 in terms of the overall system. Insurance, even I think it was top 5, 96th in the funding of small businesses. That is something that cannot be conscionable and is something that policymakers should look into more seriously. If they provide funding, they will create buffers that will enable certain members of the community to be able to enter these businesses, buy in the type of bulk that they need to be able to translate those pricing efficiencies down to the consumer. If you don't have a lot of access to capital, you cannot buy in sufficient bulk to be able to compete with Pick and Pay, to be able to compete with immigrants who are willing to sleep in those stores, who are willing to have family members working in those stores for very long hours for no pay. It's just not going to work. So part of the conversation is not, it should be about how do we get that funding? Not just like, let's chase these people, because even if you chase them, it's not going to change the business dynamics, the funding dynamics, and you're going to have the types of challenges that we are seeing in White City there. Number 8, there's also a need for basic business training. Some of the things that are causing challenges are things that can be taught: merchandising, stock taking, customer relations, bookkeeping, quality control. These can be taught to community members who are interested in participating in this spaza shop economy. And I think the obligation does rest with the government to provide this kind of education, because sometimes people dropped out of high school, people didn't get educational opportunities. They want to be part of this business. They're showing interest. Provide them with the resources. I think it's good. It helps the local economy. It brings competition into the local economy. As such, it's a government obligation. Of course, some people can go and learn this stuff on their own, but the kind of people often who can access this information are not in the spaza shop business and are in other businesses if they're entrepreneurs. So in order to make these businesses successful, people who are in that space, interested in that space, train them, equip them, give them the experience. It's a problem that can be addressed with training. If you provide these two things, the training, the funding, we will begin to see more local ownership of those spaza businesses, and we will begin to see a fall in the kinds of complaints that were raised by community members, right? What we must recognize is that the immigrant communities that get into the spaza shop business have got institutional memory. They know how to do these things. They've been doing them for a while. So in order to provide that kind of institutional knowledge and expertise, there has to be training. You cannot just go into a spaza shop today and run it successfully. You know, people who've been running these things in their family for maybe a generation, they know how to do it, or who've got a large community, they've got WhatsApp groups, etc. They support each other in doing this. In order to replicate those outcomes, that same kind of support has to be brought, right? The solution, this is my 9th point, the solution to the challenges with bodegas and spaza shops, bodega is just a fancy name for the same thing, spaza shops, is not one that should be solved by allowing big retail to come in. Big retail should not come in. Let us focus on trying to get solutions that support members of the local community and create local ownership. So big retail, whether it's Boxer brand, ShopRite, should not be allowed to come in. They are already an oligopoly in that space, and allowing them to come in further is not going to be good. So Pick and Pay through Boxer brand, for example, Boxer brand is part of Pick and Pay, and it's expanding in townships, right? Local economy does not need more Pick and Pay in that space. It needs local ownership. So Boxer Supermarket, if you weren't aware, it's part of the Pick and Pay brand. It operates as Pick and Pay's budget brand. Boxer was acquired by Pick n Pay in 2002. It has grown significantly, establishing itself as a key player in the discount supermarket sector in South Africa and also Eswatini. As of March 2024, Boxer has 295 superstores, 150 liquor stores, 31 bill stores across South Africa and Eswatini, and they've got a total of 476 stores. But part of the strategy that they want to do is to go into townships, go further, build more stores in townships. That's not going to create local economy. That's just going to create further concentration into the hands of big retail. And big retail is part of the problem. I'm going to explain a little bit further down the road. Recently, Pick n Pay has announced plans to publicly list its Boxer brand, indicating its strategic importance to the group's overall performance amid financial challenges that are being faced by Pick n Pay proper. This move aims to leverage Boxer's success and growth potential while addressing liquidity issues within Pick n Pay. So Pick n Pay is going to be one of the companies that wants to go in further and further into the township economy, into the local economy of the townships. And that's something that is going to be a challenge. Shoprite is another company that wants to be in those spaces. Shoprite was one of the first major retailers to move into the township space. It opened its first supermarket in Dobsonville, Soweto in 1995, and since then the retailer has always had a presence in the townships. It accelerated its expansion into the townships with Shoprite USave in 2001. USave has small format stores that offer a limited range of basic foods at low prices to lower income consumers. This was not enough though for Shoprite. Its USave stores felt the effect of consumers choosing to buy from informal traders closer to home. So it launched the USave Ekasi model, which is made from shipping containers, in 2019, effectively trying to capture the market and keeping up with its competitor Pick n Pay, which in 2016 launched its spaza innovative modernization program. So Shoprite and Pick n Pay are trying to dominate the township economy space, particularly when it comes to this retail that we're talking about. Now, why is this bad? The Competition Commission released a report into competition dynamics of the South African grocery retail market in 2019. And this is what it found. It found that big retailers' expansion into the townships is partly to blame for the failure of spaza shops and independent retailers. Let me read that again. The Competition Commission released its report into competition dynamics of South Africa's grocery retail market in 2019. And it found that big retailers, their expansion into the township is partly to blame for the failure of spaza shops and independent retailers. It's a big finding. So one part of the conversation has looked at the documentation status of the operators and owners of the spaza shops. But a large conversation also needs to happen around the issue of the supermarket chains trying to get into this space. And there's a report already by the Competition Commission saying that this is causing the failure of spaza shops and independent retailers. And I've shown you now, timeline-wise, how Shoprite, how Pick n Pay are trying to get into these spaces further. So my concluding remarks are the following. If politicians are serious about creating access to the township community for local residents, for South Africans, they must address the issue of documentation. Sure, that is something that needs to be addressed, cannot be avoided. But they must also address the issue of funding. They must also address the issue of business training. But equally, they must address the issue of dominance of retail by a few companies and the effect that that has in areas such as the townships. They must address the issues raised by the Competition Commission. Because the problem is not just Abo, my friend. The problem is Abo Pick and Pay, Nabo Shoprite. And we need to talk about all of them to have a genuine conversation. Till the next one.